Hey y'all, Sarah here with the Instagram account Cooking with the First Ladies, and today for the National First Ladies Library, to get in the Halloween spirit, I'm going to share some spooky stories, some ghostly encounters in the White House, and some stories about a few First Ladies who had some pretty creepy premonitions, as well as a few who turned to psychics and astrology. Now, October 26th was also National Pumpkin Day, so I'll be cooking a few pumpkin recipes and also sharing a dried fruit recipe similar to the one Michelle Obama passed out to trick-or-treaters at the White House one year. So just to get things started, Harry Truman once wrote to Bess saying, "I sit here in this old house listening to the ghosts walk up and down the hallway." And he believed that the ghosts of Andrew Jackson, Teddy Roosevelt, and Lincoln are all still hanging around the building. Now, both Harry and Bess both claimed that they heard the cries of Frances Cleveland, who was the only First Lady to give birth in the White House. They weren't actually the only ones, too, that would come across Frances Cleveland. However, no other ghost is seen as often as Abe Lincoln. First Ladies Grace Coolidge, Eleanor Roosevelt, Jackie Kennedy, and Lady Bird Johnson all claimed to have had experiences with his ghost. Eleanor actually publicly claimed to sense a presence while working in the presidential family quarters, and oftentimes felt like she was not alone. Jackie Kennedy also very strongly felt his presence in the Lincoln bedroom, so much in fact that she would sit there and find peace by being in his presence, supposedly. Some also claim that William Henry Harrison, who was the first president to die in office and after only just 1 month in the position, has also been said to be heard rummaging around up in the attic. But the real mystery is exactly what he is looking for. Now, the oldest spirit still roaming about is former First Lady Abigail Adams. Former President Taft once saw her ghost float through a door on the second floor, and there were often smells of lavender laundry soap, which was her favorite. Lou Hoover also saw Abigail heading towards the East Room, where she famously had the family's laundry hung in that room. Now for our first recipe, we are going to make a classic old-fashioned pumpkin pie recipe, which pumpkin pie was actually a favorite of Teddy Roosevelt and Taft. So first, to make the filling, you're going to beat 2 eggs and the yolk of a third. Then mix in a half a cup of brown sugar, a third a cup of sugar, half a teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, a teaspoon of ginger, a fourth a teaspoon of nutmeg, a fourth a teaspoon ground cloves, an eighth a teaspoon of cardamom, and about half a teaspoon of lemon zest. So once you have that all mixed up, then you stir in 1 15-ounce can of pumpkin puree, or you can actually make your own pumpkin puree, and 1.5 cups of heavy cream. Now, after it's mixed together, you're just gonna pour it in your pie crust, and we are going to bake this on 425 degrees for 15 minutes. Then reduce the heat to 350 degrees and bake for another 45 minutes, checking to make sure that it doesn't burn. And what you'll have is a pumpkin pie that either of the former first families would love to serve in the White House. Now, 2 former First Ladies did not wait around to have a ghostly experience. Jane Pierce and Mary Todd Lincoln both tragically lost young children, and both women actually held seances in the White House as well as spirit circles. Mary even claimed her son's ghost would visit her in her room at the foot of her bed. Jane Pierce was probably the First Lady who was most preoccupied with contacting the dead, and she also very much embraced Victorian mourning practices, such as a wardrobe of all black. She was also known to be slightly morbid, often writing about death in her letters. She constantly tried to contact her son Benny, who had been very tragically killed in a train accident, and actually the sight of his body haunted her for her whole life. Now, Jane invited the Fox sisters, who were famous spiritualists, to hold a seance to help her contact him. Mary Lincoln also consulted mediums, hosted what she called calls to the dead in the Red Room, and believed in the power of Ouija boards to tell the future. She also attended seances held by Cranston Laurie. While Jane actually never saw the ghost of her son, she did see him in 2 dreams. Mary, however, of course, claimed that her son visited her almost nightly. So after her husband's death, Mary Lincoln turned even more to spiritualism and also famously posed for a spirit photographer, which showed the image of her husband's ghost with his hands on her shoulders. And Mary very much believed it to be authentic. Mary is also the record holder for the number of encounters with apparitions, and claimed to occasionally hear Andrew Jackson's ghost cursing from his old bedroom, and also to hear Thomas Jefferson playing his violin in the yellow oval room. So for the next recipe, we are going to make Luisa Adams pumpkin bread. So for this recipe, you are going to mix together 1 3/4 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 3/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 tablespoon of cinnamon, 1/2 tablespoon of nutmeg, 1/2 teaspoon of ginger, and 1 1/2 cups of sugar. After all that is very thoroughly combined, add in 2 eggs, and it says a little bit less than 1/2 cup of water and 1 cup of pureed pumpkin. This is going to make about 2 small loaves, so you're going to bake this on 350 for about an hour, and you will have a small loaf of pumpkin bread. Now, a few first ladies also sought advice from several unconventional sources. Eleanor Roosevelt consulted a famous palm reader, Nellie Meyer. Jackie Kennedy used rune stones and I Ching, which is like a numerical-based ancient Chinese idea which guided choices of those consulting it. Instead of, she didn't really like astrologers or the daily zodiac. However, 2 first ladies, Nancy Reagan and Florence Harding, were very public about their use of astrology. Florence most frequently consulted the astrologer Madame Marcia, who used a crystal ball, among other tactics. She was introduced to Marcia by her friend, very good friend, Evelyn McLean, who was the owner of the supposedly cursed Hope Diamond, which is a great story if you are interested in that sort of thing. Marcia predicted that Harding would win the nomination, but would not live to see the end of his presidency, which of course ultimately came true. Now, Florence remained in contact with Marcia through the letters using a code name Jupiter. One of the actual stranger days at the White House was when Florence Harding, wearing a black veil, went into the East Room the first night that her husband's body laid in state, wishing to speak with him, and she did just that. Nancy Reagan was also publicly known for her use of astrologers, especially Joan Quigley. She later said that astrology was a factor in Ronald Reagan's schedule to determine what days were dangerous and when it was safe, but it actually never affected any political decisions whatsoever. Julia Tyler hosted an evening of, quote, levitation, magnetic powers, and the conjuring up of spirits from the great beyond. And also had a dream predicting the death of her husband, John Tyler. Now, she was not the only first lady to have premonitions involving their husbands. Peggy Taylor, Ida McKinley, and Julia Grant all had very strong intuitions, especially Julia Grant, who actually turned down the Lincolns' invitation to join them at the theater on that fateful evening in 1865 because she felt an overwhelming sense of doom, which ultimately this saved her husband's life because the conspirators that assassinated President Lincoln did believe that he would be there alongside the president. However, one first lady had a very different view on mediums and things like that. Dolly Madison once said to her niece after she had her fortune read that to remember we all have the power to form our own destinies. So next, we are going to make Mamie Eisenhower's pumpkin chiffon pie. Now this was a little harder to show because this is a cold recipe, but she is known as being the first lady with kind of the most famous pie recipe because it was so popular, because it was a lighter version of the pie. It was printed in several magazines and newspapers around the country every Thanksgiving. Now, Mamie can also be credited with hosting the very first Halloween at the White House in 1956. She had the state dining room decorated with 1950s paper decorations, including witches, black cats, skeletons, as well as corn stalks and pumpkins for an afternoon luncheon. Mamie also kind of had some other ideas as well, because she had her tea leaves read years before, and in fact that predicted her husband would go on to greatness. So to make the chiffon pie, you're first going to take 1 envelope of unflavored gelatin, or Knox gelatin, and soak it in 1/4 cup of cold water. Then take 3 beaten egg yolks, 3/4 cups of brown sugar, 1½ cups of cooked pumpkin, 1/2 cup of milk, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1/2 tablespoon of nutmeg. So after all that's combined, you cook that over a double boiler on the stove until it becomes a very thick mixture. Once it's thick, you're going to chill that until it's slightly set. Then take 3 egg whites and 1/4 cup of sugar, beat them until very stiff peaks form, kind of like you're making a meringue. Combine the two, fold in the 2 mixtures, pour into the pie crust, and chill until you're ready to serve. Finally, you can top this with whipped cream. The recipe says you can make this 1 large pie like this one, or you can actually make little 8 individual pies. So some more White House Halloween traditions evolved too as Jackie Kennedy entered the White House, where her children would dress in costume and crash the Oval Office. Families with younger children, such as the Carters and the Clintons and the Obamas, all kind of held larger events on the grounds for the Halloween holiday for their small children. The Nixons began the tradition of hosting events for local children, and one entrance to the White House was actually made into the mouth of a huge pumpkin. In 1982, the Reagans were given a pumpkin that said, "Stay the course," prior to the election that year. Now, a few first ladies also got into the spirit by dressing in costume. Hillary Clinton dressed as Dolly Madison alongside Bill as James Madison in 1993. And Pat Nixon once dressed as a gypsy. Now, adorably enough, Barbara Bush used to dress their pets up for Halloween, and one year their Scotty dogs were a strawberry and a cowboy, while their cat was a wizard back in 2007. So, however, in my opinion, the most frightening costume was that of Jackie Kennedy and her sister-in-law, who wore garment bags over their heads with the eyes cut out. She is also the first lady known to have dressed up as an adult. So more recently, however, the Obamas hosted local trick-or-treaters and handed out candy, but also notoriously dried fruit, which was in line with her Healthy Kids campaign. So today we're going to just make a little bit of dried fruit mix similar to the one that Michelle passed out for Halloween trick-or-treating. You will just take a combination of dried fruits such as apples, pears, pineapple, cherries, apricots, blueberries, papaya, and banana chips, and just mix them together. It's very simple, and you can actually add in other types of dried fruits that you like, that of course I didn't list, and make it the way that you like it. Then you can kind of fill up small little bags with the mix, and there you have a healthy alternative to candy. So also, if you are carving up pumpkins, don't forget to bake the seeds. All you have to do is rinse the pumpkin guts off the seeds and toss lightly in olive oil. Then you just sprinkle a little bit of salt or chili powder for spicy seeds, or kind of whatever your favorite seasoning is, and you'll bake that on 350 degrees for about 15 minutes. Or until they're browned. Thank you all so much for joining today. I hope you'll enjoy some pumpkin dishes and maybe a healthy option for Halloween candy, but chocolate is always the best. Don't forget to let us know which recipe is your favorite. Hope y'all have a spooky and safe Halloween. And as always, follow the National First Ladies Library on socials and YouTube, and follow me on Cooking with the First Ladies on Instagram. Happy Halloween, y'all, and I will see you next time.